Thanks, Brooke. President Trump saying today, quote, "It's frankly disgusting the way the press is able to write whatever they want to write, and people should look into it." Well, I have looked into it, and you might want to start looking into it too, Mr. President. The lead starts right now. Breaking news, North Korea making a direct threat to the U.S., saying an insane President Trump, quote, "lit the wick of war." And now the world braces for the next tweet. How do powerful accused sexual predators such as Harvey Weinstein keep getting away with their despicable acts? Well, the author of the possibly culture-changing New Yorker expose will join us live. Plus, one victim said it looks like Armageddon. Winds are now threatening to spread wildfires that have now killed 21 people across the state of California as families frantically search for the hundreds reported missing. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We begin this afternoon with our world lead, the nuclear standoff with North Korea reaching another alarming level just a short time ago. North Korea's foreign minister declaring today that President Trump's, quote, insane warning at the United Nations, quote, lit the wick of war. Moments ago, President Trump denied that he wants to increase the U.S. nuclear stockpile, as had been reported, but he did say the stockpile must be in perfect condition.
We won't need an increase, but I want modernization and I want total rehabilitation. It's got to be in tip-top shape.
Last night, Mr. Trump was briefed yet again by Defense Secretary James Mattis and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, on a range of military options in North Korea. Meanwhile, American B-1 bombers conducted mock missile launches along the Korean peninsula yesterday. CNN's Barbara Starr begins our coverage live from the Pentagon.
B-1 bombers flying in a show of force over the Pacific, sending the message just one more time to Kim Jong-un that the U.S. is ready to move against him if it comes to that. President Trump met again with national security officials to review what the White House calls a range of options to respond to any form of North Korean aggression or, if necessary, to prevent North Korea from threatening the United States and its allies with nuclear weapons. But when asked if he is on the same page as Secretary of State Rex Tillerson,
I think I have a little bit different attitude on North Korea than other people might have. And I listen to everybody, but ultimately, my attitude is the one that matters, isn't it?
The North Korean foreign minister telling the Russian state-run TASS news agency President Trump lit the wick of war when he spoke to the UN.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
Pentagon officials say there will be more U.S. military shows of force. 3 aircraft carriers could be training together in the region as early as next month, as President-elect Donald Trump called for expanding the nuclear arsenal in a tweet last December. The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes. But increasing the nuclear fleet would be hindered by arms control limits and the billions of dollars in costs, and many say it's just not needed.
There is really no difference between delivering one nuclear device or 10 nuclear devices on the same target. That target will be obliterated regardless.
Experts say it's more important to fix the weapons on hand.
What should have been addressed by the president is the quality of the nuclear weaponry that we have right now. Our nuclear armory does have some issues when it comes to sustainability, reliability, and quite frankly, usability.
And cyberspace is now the unseen battle with North Korea. Several defense officials tell CNN the Pentagon is working on highly classified cyber war plans against the regime. North Korea may already be fighting back. The North allegedly hacked into South Korean systems holding the critical war plans involving the U.S., including destroying the North's regime leadership. The Pentagon will only say current war plans are secure. And also in cyberspace, a U.S. cybersecurity firm is reporting that hackers affiliated with North Korea tried to get into the U.S. electric power companies last month. The reports are that they were not successful in disrupting the power supply, but it does underscore the path North Korea is on. Jake?
Barbara Starr, thank you so much. This all comes as we're learning new details about a tense meeting over the summer between President Trump and his national security team, after which sources say Secretary of State Rex Tillerson called the president a, quote, moron. CNN's Jeff Zeleny has that story from the White House.
President Trump welcoming Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to the White House today.
Thank you all very much. I very much appreciate. We're here with a man who has become a friend of mine.
The president and the prime minister were all smiles. Unlike Mr. Trump, has been with some of his own top advisors, like Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. It's been 1 week since reports first surfaced that Tillerson referred to the president as a moron after a national security meeting this summer. CNN has learned the president was infuriated when he learned about the remark and has been fuming behind closed doors ever since. Today, the president had this to say about his top diplomat.
We have a very good relationship. The press really doesn't understand that, but that's okay. We actually have a very good relationship.
Yet in the next breath, the president also made clear he sees the nuclear threat with North Korea differently, particularly in balancing a diplomatic and military response. Asked if he was on the same page with Tillerson, the president said this.
I think I have a little bit different attitude on North Korea than other people might have. And I listen to everybody, but ultimately, my attitude is the one that matters, isn't it? That's the way it works. That's the way the system is.
It's that attitude that worries some of the president's advisors and members of Congress, like Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker, who said he fears Trump was leading the U.S. on a path to World War III.
I think I might have a somewhat different attitude and a different way than other people. I think perhaps I feel stronger and tougher on that subject than other people.
The president also dismissed an NBC News report today that said he called for increasing the U.S. nuclear arsenal by 10 times the amount of current levels.
No, I never discussed. I think somebody said I want 10 times the nuclear weapons that we have right now. Right now we have so many nuclear weapons. I want them in perfect condition, perfect shape. That's the only thing I've ever discussed.
But CNN has learned a July 20th meeting at the Pentagon that led to the moron comment was difficult and tense. Today, the president said he hasn't called for expanding nuclear capacity, which he actually has done several times. During the transition, he tweeted, "The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes."
Now, Jake, that is one of the underlying issues here. Some White House advisors and advisors elsewhere throughout the government wonder if the president has a grasp on nuclear weapons, among other things, particularly what would be involved in increasing them. Of course, those are guided by international guidelines, and they've been reducing them, over the last decades or so. But the president, in that meeting in the Oval Office today, said, "I understand this," was making clear that he knows them. But Jake, that tense meeting at the White House, that is, or the Pentagon this summer on July 20th, that is one of the reasons here that led to that comment. It's one of the reasons that people still question his grasp of all this. Jake.
Jeff Zeleny at the White House for us. Thank you so much. So should Congress be concerned about President Trump's, quote, different attitude on North Korea from his own administration officials? We'll talk to one Republican lawmaker next. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Lead, and let's stay with our world lead now, the escalating nuclear showdown between the United States and North Korea. Joining me now to discuss this all is Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he fought in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Congressman, good to see you as always. So this week, the Republican chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, Senator Bob Corker, questioned the president's fitness for office, essentially, and he said Mr. Trump, in his view, is taking us, the nation, down the path of World War III. He also suggested that this is a sentiment privately expressed by almost every senator. Is this something that you've heard from your colleagues in the House?
No, actually I haven't, to be honest with you. I think, this Trump-Corker feud's weird to me. I don't really know what it sparked from. I don't agree with Bob Corker, though, that we're on a path to World War III. I've actually said that I think the president's handling, I don't agree with all his statements and tweets necessarily on this, but I think the way he's handling North Korea is actually really good, because you finally have a stick being shown, a stick option to back up the potential for a carrot and to get a diplomatic solution to this thing. Up until now, and his audience, frankly, isn't Kim Jong-un. The audience is the Chinese, the Russians, the people that use basically the slave labor from North Korea that import material to them and buy goods from them, is that this is serious. We're taking it seriously, and we need to handle this diplomatically.
We've heard Republicans say that there really isn't a military option that's viable without tens of thousands, if not millions of people being killed in both North Korea and South Korea. Steve Bannon said something like that to the American Prospect on his way out the door from the White House. The Chief of the Staff of the U.S. Army, General Mark Milley, said this week, quote, "There are no good, easy, risk-free options here. You have served in combat. You have visited South Korea recently. At what point do you think any, if any, military intervention would be justified? Just a threat to the U.S. or its allies, an actual attack? What would North Korea need to do for you to think that it was okay for there to be military intervention by the U.S.?
Well, I think it's tough. Like, what's the trigger point? I think firing rockets over Japan, we can, figure out the trajectory when it's shot. Putting rockets over our allies, then saying you have the ability to miniaturize a nuclear warhead now, and they do. They haven't perfected reentry on intercontinental ballistic missiles yet, but that's coming. So what you have here is different than, like you had in India and Pakistan. You have nuclear weapons. You have a regime that says they're going to use them and a regime that throws them all over the place, making us think they might be willing to use it. So what is that trigger point? It's hard to really put out there. I think the national security establishment that knows way more details than I do can pick that. But I'll tell you the very worst case scenario. Military is a really bad case scenario. The worst case scenario is a nuclear North Korea with the ability to shoot more missiles than we can handle in terms of defending and intercept. And they've claimed their desire to use it.
CNN's learned that North Korean hackers or hackers affiliated with North Korea stole classified military documents from a South Korean Defense Ministry database in September 2016. The stolen documents included the South Korea-U.S. wartime plans and a document that includes procedures to, quote, decapitate the North Korean leadership. That must be very concerning for you.
Yeah, absolutely. All these hacks, whether it's into our security establishment, South Korea, the North Koreans are good at cyber attacks, cyber offense. We saw this with the stealing of the hacking in Hollywood they did. Yeah, it's very concerning. We can move war plans, we can change them, we can put new plans in place, and I assume that's been done and being done. But it does give the enemy an insight into, how we would go about a military option potentially. And so I think, look, on all these things, why we continue to have hacks and how adversaries can continue to get into these what should be very secure servers and information storage is something that a government, we got to quit just saying we're going to look into it. We got to really do something. I'm not the security expert, so I don't know what that thing is, but we've got to do something to make sure we're not going to continually have our national security apparatus of us or our allies interfered with.
Tomorrow, President Trump is expected to decertify the nuclear deal with Iran. The chairman of the House Foreign Relations Committee, Ed Royce, says that the deal, although he had issues with it when it was started, it should stay in place. It just need to have it be enforced. What's your position? Do you agree with Chairman Royce, or are you ready to vote for new sanctions on Iran, thus invalidating the whole deal?
Well, it'll be interesting. So the president, from what I understand, is not going to tear up the deal and pull out. He's going to decertify, and that gives us an opportunity either to reimpose sanctions or hopefully to bring the Europeans and potentially the Iranians on board for a better deal that makes sense. The IAEA right now sometimes is getting soil samples from Iran that they send in themselves. The Russians are demanding that they be present. Otherwise, we can't inspect military sites. So there's a lot of loopholes to this, but I want to see what the president actually lays out. I've been briefed on some of it, but I think you're going to see a comprehensive strategy for Iran that's more than just this nuclear deal that I think is going to make sense. From what I understand, I think the whole thing makes sense. But I'll be interested to see how the president articulates that when he does. And then I think we can have real conversations. Right now, it's just kind of pieces that are coming out that aren't a bigger picture.
All right, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, always good to see you, sir. Thanks.
Yeah, anytime. See ya.
A growing death toll, hundreds reported missing, and entire neighborhoods turned into piles of charred wreckage. And now high winds could ignite even more danger. The wildfires in California. That story's next. And we're back with some breaking news in the national lead. Hundreds are now reported missing. Home after home almost vaporized. Shifting winds making it difficult for firefighters to get the upper hand as they battle those horrific wildfires in California. The state of California now reporting 21 deaths related to these fires. And just look at what first responders are up against. This is the view from a deputy's dash cam earlier this week in Sonoma County. And this is what's left of some neighborhoods. Practically nothing. This is the Coffee Park neighborhood in Santa Rosa, California. The fire destroyed everything that wasn't steel, concrete, or brick. CNN's Miguel Marquez is live for us in Napa. And Miguel, as the evacuations expand, are Californians heeding the warnings to leave?
They are heeding the warnings, and those warnings are only getting bigger. You were talking about Coffee Park in Santa Rosa. That's about 30 miles from where I'm standing right here. This is Sig and Yellow Vineyards. This is one of 3,500 businesses or homes that have been destroyed across a swath of California from just north of San Francisco to the Oregon border. I want to give you a sense of what it sounds like to sort of walk through this stuff. It is terrible the way all this stuff has just been absolutely destroyed. And here's the problem. 607 people in Sonoma County alone. This is Napa County. Sonoma County is just over there. 607 people missing there, reported missing there. They've reported that they found 110 so far. But the problem is people had to get out so quickly. The wind's blowing around 75 miles per hour. People didn't have time to even think. They just grabbed what they could and left. The police are only finding people who have died because they happen to be in the neighborhood, not because somebody is called, not because they've actually gotten a call from a place or heard someone's there. They just happen upon them. There is great concern that the death toll in this fire will go up and up. And here's even the bigger problem. While we had a respite yesterday, it looked like the winds were coming down. This afternoon, they are predicting winds up to 45 mile per hour gusts in this area. The fire is just in the hills back there. It is coming this way. Any place that is south of those fires, they are starting to evacuate now. There is great concern. That the lines they've been building, that those attempts to protect structures in the area as well will not hold. They are completely, in this part of the world, at the mercy of the wind tonight. Jake?
Horrific story. Miguel Marquez, thank you so much. Multiple women have now come forward accusing Harvey Weinstein, the film producer, of everything from sexual harassment to rape. We're going to talk to the reporter who talked to several accusers about why this story didn't come out sooner. That's next. We're back with our pop culture lead now. The fallout from the Harvey Weinstein sexual assault scandal continues to widen today as we hear from even more accusers whose allegations suggest a staggering, wide-ranging reign of harassment and even rape by the powerful film producer. This afternoon, the New York District Attorney is defending his decision not to press charges against Weinstein in 2015 after actress Ambra Badalona Gutierrez accused him of groping her, and then she wore a wire to record another encounter with Weinstein the next day. District Attorney Cy Vance telling reporters today that wire was not enough.
I understand that folks are outraged by his behavior. I understand that there are many other allegations that have surfaced, but in our case, we really did what I think the law obligates us to do. If we had a case that we felt we could prosecute, and my experts felt we could prosecute against Harvey Weinstein, we would have.
Weinstein's wife, moreover, has issued a statement saying she is leaving him, while the board of the Weinstein Company says it will soon have a new name for the company. Bob Weinstein, in addition, gave a statement to TMZ calling his brother Harvey, quote, a very sick man and a, quote, world-class liar who is looking to blame others. Here to talk more about the story is Ronan Farrow. He's the author of that deeply disturbing Weinstein expose that ran in The New Yorker, in which 13 women told him they had been sexually harassed, assaulted, or even raped by Weinstein. Ronan, thanks so much for being here. So we know that for decades, reporters have been trying to get this story into print. You finally did. How is it that a story with such enormous a scope, such horrific, really human rights violations, didn't come to public light until now because of you and the New York Times?
I mean, look, these women describe obviously horrific allegations. They really tore their guts out, Jake, telling these stories. I mean, they had nothing to gain and everything to lose. They were all terrified to do this. And that terror, I think, speaks to the question you're asking. Again and again, they said they feared retaliation. They talked about a vast machine, a legal apparatus that locked them into restrictive non-disclosure agreements in return for payouts, a PR apparatus that smeared some of these women. It is perhaps not coincidental, several of them said, that in the case you just highlighted of Ms. Gutierrez, several items began to appear as the DA was considering this case about her sexual history, about her past in Italy.
Yeah. These stories, they're really human rights abuses. As the reporter that uncovered so many of them, What was the most horrific part of this for you?
You know, I want to highlight one story in particular. Asia Argento, this Italian actress, told a really horrific story of a rape. And, you know, very credible. Obviously, you wouldn't be reading this in the New Yorker if it hadn't checked out to the nth degree. And she specifically talked about a phenomenon that's present in a number of these stories, Jake, which is she went back afterwards. She went back to her alleged attacker. And that was a source of tremendous shame for a lot of these women, that he was enmeshed in their professional lives, that they continued to be afraid in a way that made them submit to him. That is a facet of sexual assault and harassment that often is very real. And it was brave of her to talk about it.
And speaking of Argento, I want to play a clip of a movie directed by her. She is one of the people, as you know, who accuses Weinstein of rape, and that she told you that Weinstein himself saw this clip and recognized this as based on what happened between them. Let's run a little bit of that.
You know what would be great is if you give me a massage, you know, just a little massage to make me just relax. Then I can read that little story of yours, you know, that Scarlet Diva thing.
A little massage?
Yeah, just a couple minutes. Come on, please.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
No, it'll be fine. Just a couple minutes.
So he tries to entice these women into just an innocent massage, and then from there it gets horrific.
And Jake, you know, she talked about how not only did Weinstein, she said, come up to her and say, you know, I recognize myself, ha ha, very funny. She also said, you know, woman after woman, including other actresses, came up to her and said they recognized that pattern of behavior. And that's how she came to the conclusion, in her words, that this was a modus operandi.
You know, the board of the Weinstein Company, which includes Harvey's brother Bob, said that the allegations were an utter surprise to them. But when you read your story and the New York Times story, and it's part of the culture, obviously, at the Weinstein Company, staff members were clearly part of it. Do you buy it? Do you believe that Bob Weinstein and the board of directors had no idea this was going on?
There were 16 former and current executives and assistants that spoke to me for this story who corroborated these allegations, who said they had either personally witnessed things that they were troubled by or participated in what they described as a pattern of meetings that were just sort of thin cover for predatory advances on young women. This was very enmeshed in company business. And again, they said everybody knew. You know, and you know, I can't speak to what Bob Weinstein knew or didn't know without extensive reporting on that, but I can say that there were a lot of people in this piece saying they knew and they felt guilty about not speaking out.
An attorney for Mr. Weinstein released a statement about your article saying, quote, any allegations of non-consensual sex are unequivocally denied by Mr. Weinstein. This is Harvey Weinstein. Mr. Weinstein has further confirmed that there were never any acts of retaliation against any women for refusing his advances. With respect to any women who have made allegations on the record, Mr. Weinstein believes that all of these relationships were consensual, unquote. Might Weinstein, do you think, face some sort of legal action in the wake of this story?
Look, I mean, obviously, this was a New Yorker piece. He had a very fair opportunity to comment and give input and be in discussions about this piece. And he said these things, that this was not consensual, that there was no retaliation. The women tell a very different story. And we have seen in previous cases of this kind that, you know, at this point, after the revelations come, there are decisions in the hands of these women. And, you know, I'm not going to speak to specific legal or other remedies that are available to them, but I know that, you know, I'm still talking to a large number of these women and that they continue to be committed to, you know, exposing a culture of silence around this.
You mentioned earlier the smearing of the Italian model who went to the police after he allegedly assaulted her. And I want to talk to you about the media complicity in this outrageous story, because in 2015, specifically the New York Post devoted its cover to smearing the actress I mentioned earlier, and model Ambra Betalana Gutierrez, reporting, quote, the model accusing Harvey Weinstein of molestation tried to score a movie role. We just ran a picture of the tabloid cover. That's only one of the many attacks on Betalana that appeared in the press after she accused Weinstein. The media, some in the media, not everyone in the media, but the media really played a role in serving as Harvey Weinstein's enforcer. And the media, some in the media are responsible for this happening, this continuing to happen. They have assault and rape on their hands, in my view.
So, you know, in the story itself, there's a young woman named Emily Nestor who also did a very brave thing going on the record. And she said she actually witnessed a case of this transpiring in real time where Mr. Weinstein was enraged about a dispute that was happening with an actress in one of his films in the press and was, you know, talking about planting stories, she said, and in a threatening way, she felt, told her, watch the news cycle, there will be negative items about my opponents in this. And indeed there were, and he came by her desk at the company after this alleged sexual harassment and said, did you see? And that is something that was tremendously frightening to a lot of these women, Jake, and absolutely is a huge part of this story.
Now, you reported this originally for NBC News, but you ultimately took it to the New Yorker in order to find a media outlet that would run it. An NBC source told the Daily Beast, quote, he brought NBC News early reporting on Weinstein that didn't meet the standard to go forward with the story. It was nowhere close to what ultimately ran. At that time, he didn't have one accuser willing to go on the record or identify themselves. The story he published is radically different than what he brought to NBC News, unquote. That seems like a real lie to me. My understanding is while the story was at NBC, you had 3 named women, the full NYPD audio, and every one of the quoted executives and employees that you referenced earlier in your story, you had them all. What's the truth here?
Look, Jake, you understand this. These are human rights abuses, as you said. These are women coming forward with a very, very hard set of stories, and I really want the focus to be on them and what they did and continuing their fight. You know, look, the media piece of this is a conversation that can unfold over time. I've already spoken as of last night on the Rachel Maddow show. You know, I was confronted with a question I didn't expect, and I answered it honestly. As I understand it now, NBC is no longer claiming that I brought this story to them. It was assigned at NBC, and they have talked, you know, about how long it was there and the fact that there was a lot while it was there. I truly do think it's very important for us to stay focused on the women here.
All right. I can't disagree with that. Ronan Farrow, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for the excellent reporting. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Is President Trump taking his media name-calling a step further? Now he's actually threatening action. That's next. We're back with our politics lead now. President Trump suggesting earlier that media outlets that report critically on him should be punished. He tweeted today, quote, with all the fake news coming out of NBC and the networks, at what point is it appropriate to challenge their license? Bad for country, exclamation point. This comes after an NBC News report that the White House and Defense Secretary Mattis call false, that the president, quote, wanted what amounted to a nearly 10-fold increase in the U.S. nuclear arsenal. My political panel is here with me to discuss this and much, much more. So am I over-reading this? I'm going to take this seriously, but not literally, that he actually thinks that there should be some sort of way that the media companies can be punished or their licenses can be taken away if they report critically on him. Am I being unfair?
No, that's what it sounded like. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. And I suppose he's referring to broadcast licensing, which is thankfully a bit of an anachronism. We can all get access to many forms of media outside of that.
On the internet now.
But it's not allowed at all to discriminate those licenses based on the content of that programming, because free speech and all that good stuff.
It's just astounding, but we don't. It's almost like we don't even. If President Obama had said that about Fox News, and he certainly was harsh about Fox News, but if he had said something about taking away their licenses, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, the world would explode, definitely. But look, he's not. President Trump is not really known as a big free speech advocate. Actually, he's talked a lot about wanting to change libel laws. I mean, he doesn't. You know, he thinks that, you know, I do think he thinks if you say something critical about him, that he should be able to sue you, and has a pretty an unusual position for somebody who in the Republican Party today, right? Because this is not the conservative position today on free speech. It's really become an issue that, you know, conservatives take pretty seriously.
Well, he has a transactional relationship with freedom of speech, as he does with so many other things. It's like, if this is bugging me at the moment, I don't like it. Get it out of here.
Take a listen to President Trump this afternoon.
And it's frankly disgusting the way the press is able to write whatever they want to write.
Now, speaking of people who write whatever they want to write, I mean, President Trump he wrote something false on his Twitter feed today about the NFL and the reason why they're imposing, or not imposing, but their stance on the national anthem. He doesn't seem to understand that the biggest purveyor of false news, fake news, is him. And it blows my mind that he thinks, like, well, they shouldn't be able to print this, but I can say and print whatever I want.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two parts here that often one side doesn't recognize the other one. The president and the press can lose credibility and have credibility to give away, and too often are giving it away on both sides. I don't even mind the president as a media critic and taking some shots every now and then, and I think many in America don't mind that every now and then, because we do get things wrong, and sometimes we don't admit it. But this is when you go too far, and you can't punish them, and people can write whatever they want. That's how this works.
Yeah. Turning to what he said today about the NFL, he tweeted, "It is about time that Roger Goodell of the NFL is finally demanding that all players stand for our great national anthem, respect our country." Now, the NFL is disputing that the president's tweet is a correct interpretation of what they're doing. It's not happening, at least not as of now. There is something that they're going to unveil to team owners. But there are those who say that the president, by getting team owners and Goodell to kind of hug and lean towards the flag and the anthem and against the demonstrations during the anthem, that he's won this chapter in the culture war, this battle in the culture war. Do you agree?
Oh, no, go ahead.
I think we're all losing.
Yeah.
Just because we're all being divided?
Yeah. But look, I do think his was as often, his gut instinct is correct, that people do react viscerally to a protest that happens with the flag and happens with the anthem, even though there's another part to it. It's more complex. That he was right, that there's a whole group of people, millions of people, who he was speaking for in part of that. The NFL, I think, is probably going to overcorrect and tick off all the people who weren't ticked off already, because the NFL is bad at doing things, and Roger Goodell is bad at doing things.
Yeah, but also I just think it's important to remember that Donald Trump, I don't think, really cares that much about the patriotism and the flag. And we've seen the way he talks about some patriots in our country, John McCain, for example. So that's not really what this is about. This is a culture war that he saw he could get in the middle of, and he could, you know, win over his base and make his base happy. I don't believe he personally cares one way or the other about the fact that about the national anthem. And I also think that there's no way that these players could protest, even if it didn't involve the national anthem, that Donald Trump would be okay with, right? If they waited and did it after the anthem and say they decided to come out and just put their fists up and say something, are we supposed to believe that Donald Trump would just be like, oh, that's great, we love that protest? He'd find another reason to have a problem with it.
Interesting comments today from Tom Barrack, who's a close friend of Mr. Trump's. He's been called the Trump Whisperer. He was the chairman of the of the inaugural, and he spoke at the convention. And he said this to the Washington Post, quote, "Trump thinks he has to be loyal to his base. I keep on saying, but who is your base? You don't have a natural base. Your base now is the world and America. So you have all these constituencies. Show them who you really are. In my opinion, he's better than this," meaning he's better than what we're seeing. Barrack also said he was shocked and stunned by some of the president's rhetoric and tweets. This is one of the president's closest friends. He's been talked about theoretically as possibly a new chief of staff if Kelly leaves. Do you see this as something of an intervention? What is this?
Well, it does seem interesting that a lot of these folks are going to the press and saying these kinds of things. And he's, of course, a very close friend. He's famous for the fact that he can disagree with the president and remain a close friend. I guess we'll see, because the end of that he's better than this seems like something that might tick President Trump off. But I think he's a valuable person to have if he can indeed disagree with him and stay a close friend, because he needs someone like that.
It does seem like a pretty shocking thing for a good friend to say to the Washington Post, not to be overheard saying it, not to saying it to President Trump. He's better than this.
Yeah, but also I just had to ask myself, is he better than this? Like, what's the evidence that he's better than this? And in the article, I didn't feel like he really offered it. He even at one point referred to how Donald Trump is seen as being this very selfish, self-involved person. And so how does he manage to be friends with him for so long? And he said it's, because he doesn't need anything from him and he's always sort of subservient to him. Well, I mean, I didn't see him painting another picture. Like, who's the real Donald Trump that we're not seeing? I don't understand. Like,
it's a good question.
The real Slim Shady. Please stand up.
Oh, it's nice. M&M's in the news. Barrack said, quote, "I tell him all the time, I don't like the rhetoric." So if the president's not listening, presumably, to Ivanka Trump, and not listening to Tom Barrack, one of his oldest and dearest friends, obviously not listening to former Marine General John Kelly quite often, is there anyone he listens to?
I mean, I think that's been the question, is that, and when Kelly came into the administration, the question was, look, can he put some more order into different ways that the administration does something? Sure. But can you fundamentally change this human being? I doubt it. And the key is to have somebody in the room who can disagree with him and that he might actually listen to. I'm not convinced there is that person, even Tom Barrack.
Final thought?
Yeah, I think that he's doing what he does to get his hit from his base, right? And so something has to change where someone can convince him that he can get the attention that he craves from somebody else. And right now, there's just a certain part of the population that likes what he's doing and a certain part of the population that doesn't. And I think he's going to continue to cater to those people.
And the majority of the population is the majority that doesn't like what he's doing.
Right.
All right. Great job. Thank you so much, Mary Catherine and Kirsten Powers. A major change coming to the Boy Scouts of America. That story's next.
Let it go, make my body go, make our bodies higher.